I do want to make this quick video because the quiz is going to have the old quiz on factoring, so please study that old quiz. That's the first half of it. The second half is coming from this worksheet and maybe a couple of problems from the book assignment that I gave you. So let me just do a couple of these. Number one, what's the answer to that? The answer is 6 with an I, and that's it, right? If you ask why, well, you could rewrite negative 36 as negative 1 times 36, split the root. We all should know that the square root of negative 1 is I, and the square root of 36 is 6. And I times 6 is simply 6I, piece of cake. You don't have to do this work. You need to know that answer. Now, number two, I'm not going to ask you to do any question like this, but I might ask you to just simplify the square root of negative 8, or maybe just simplify the square root of negative 32. So let's do that. Let's treat this like if it were two separate problems. What would that answer be? Well, we know that a negative sign, you could rewrite it as I on the outside, right? So let's do this. I on the outside, square root of 8. And now that 8, it's not a perfect square number. What am I going to rewrite that as?
2 square root of 2.
Oh, okay, well, let's break it down. So 4 times 2, 4 is a perfect square number. Split the root. You have the I on the outside. You really have I, the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 2 stays square root of 2. So we're just going to rearrange it, and our final nice answer is 2 with the I and then the square root at the very end. Yeah? Okay, now again, this is not what they asked us to do on the worksheet. If you look at the back, that answer is not going to be there, right? Let's do this one right here, the square root of negative 32. Well, again, you could pull out that negative, make it an I on the outside. Now 32, you're going to rewrite it as what? 16 times 2, I hope you guys know. Not 4 times 8, but 16 times 2. That way, when you split the root with the I on the outside, you'll actually get I times 4 times the square root of 2. And just rearrange it, and your final answer will be, bless you, 4I square root of 2. Yay?
Yeah.
Now, again, that's not what they're asking you to do on this worksheet. I'm just practicing, because I might ask one of those. I'm not going to ask you to multiply both of those, but like let's say we wanted the answer that they have in the back. Let's just take both of these answers right here, and let's multiply them together, yeah? So if I were to take the 2 times I times square root of 2 and multiply it by 4 times I times square root of 2, it's all pure multiplication. Between the 2 and the I, there's multiplication. Between the I and the square root, there's multiplication. There's multiplication, multiplication, multiplication. It's all multiplication, which means you could rearrange things, and we'll have 2 times 4 times I times square root of 2 times square root of 2. 2 times 4 is 8. I times I is I squared, which we know changes to a negative 1. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is? Square root of 4, which is? 2. So you really have 8 times negative 1 times 2. So what's your final answer? Negative 16. That's the answer that you'll see in the back, because they actually multiplied this guy with this guy. They gave you the answer, negative 16. I'm just saying, I'm probably just going to ask either to simplify the square root of negative 8 or simplify the square root of negative 32. What else am I going to ask on the quiz tomorrow? Definitely at least one of these, right? I to the 42nd power. Anybody know what that answer is going to be?
1. No.
No.
Negative 1.
22.
Negative 1.
Yeah.
Negative 1. Okay, now check this out. Your answers for these type of questions are either going to be I, because I equals I squared, which is going to be negative 1, I to the third, which is really negative I, right? Or I to the fourth, which is really 1. And then after that, it repeats. So your answer is going to be one of these guys. And all you have to remember is I to the fourth is 1, which means I to any power that's divisible by 4 will be 1. So what's I to the fourth?
10.
What's I to the fourth?
1.
What's I to the 8th? 1. What's I to the 16th? 1. What's I to the 24th? What's I to the 40th? 1. Okay, so we know that, right? I to the 40th is 1. So let's rewrite the I to the 42nd. Let's rewrite it as I to the 40th, which you guys just said is 1. And obviously we need 2 more I's. Yeah, so this is really a 1 times negative 1, which the answer is negative 1. So I hope we understand how special I to the fourth is, right? Let's take a look at this next one. Now this one, probably need a calculator, right? 4 times what gets us close to 55 without going over? 13, right? Okay, that would give us 52, right? So I could rewrite this as I to the 52 times how many more i's?
3.
3.
Oh, can you just do like 2 and then I?
So do we understand what I did here?
Yeah.
Like why did I change 55 to 52 and 3? Because this is divisible by 4, right? And if it's divisible by 4, what? What does this equal? That's just 1. This guy right here is just 1. So what's 1 times I to the third? Well, we need to think about I to the third. That's really I to the second, which is negative 1 times another I. So what's your answer there? Negative I. Again, if you just know these 4, I squared is negative 1, I to the third is negative I to the fourth is 1. If you know those 4, it's going to be one of those answers. In this case, it's negative I. One more. What's that answer going to be? I, right? Just I. Why? Because we know that I to the 88 is 1 times 1 more I. That's just going to be 1 times I, which is I. What do you think? Aye. Okay. We are going to have some where we add and subtract. So this is not distribution, all right? We're going to have one of adding, one of subtracting. This is not distribution. There's a plus sign. There is not a multiplication sign. So all we're doing is really combining like terms, guys, right? Just combining like terms. So let's combine the real 7 with the real 9. What's that? 16. And let's combine the negative 6i with the positive 11i. What's that? 5i. Positive 5i. Guess what? We're done. Bless you. Yeah, it's like pre-algebra, right? Just combining like terms. The regular numbers with the regular numbers and the i's with the i's. That's like a free point on tomorrow's test or quiz. Maybe I should have combined 7 with 9. We got 16. Combine negative, or maybe I shouldn't do that. Negative 6i with positive 11i. We got positive 5i. You always write your real first, your imaginary second. Let's try one with subtraction. Which one is the one with subtraction? 12? Okay, there we go. Let's pick 12. Sure, why not? So the one with subtraction, you actually distribute the minus sign. Okay, I apologize. So when you distribute that minus 48, or the minus sign into the 48, you get a minus 48. When you distribute the minus sign into the minus 30, you get a positive 30, of course, with an I. Bring down the 10, the plus, the 15i. Combine like terms to start with the real numbers. 10 minus 48 is negative 38. 15i with the positive 30i, that's going to be plus 45 of those i's. And that's your answer. No distribution. So there's going to be one adding, one subtracting. What else is there going to be? Definitely some multiplying ones. I don't know, pick one, multiplying.
16.
16?
Yeah.
Excellent choice. Let's distribute. So 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times negative 5i is negative 20i. And then let's distribute the positive 3i times 2. That's a positive 6i. Positive 3i times negative 5i is negative 15i squared. Now, after you distribute, you usually combine like terms and rewrite your I squared into a negative, right? So let's combine the negative 20i with the positive 6i, negative 14i, and let's change that I squared to a negative 1. So think about it. We have a negative 15 times negative 1.
15.
That's positive 15. And the 8 out here in the front, just bring it down. Let's combine the first real 8 with the last real 15. 8 plus 15 is 23, right?
Yes.
So we have 23 minus 14i. Done. So yeah, distributing does require a little bit more work. Remember that whenever you end up with the I squared, you change to a negative 1. There's also going to be some where you have to get rid, there's going to be two of these, all right? Two of these where you have to get rid of the I in the denominator. Now, if you have one single term, it's not a binomial. If you have a single term, you could get rid of the I by simply multiplying both top and bottom by I. So everybody put a times I down here and a times I up there. Now, on the top, we do have a binomial, so put parentheses around the whole top. On the bottom, let's work this out. What is I times I? Negative 2I squared, right? So you really have negative 2, and I squared is really a negative 1. So you really have a negative 2 times a negative 1. So what do we really have on the bottom? 2. So 2 is on the bottom. Now let's go for the top up here. We're going to distribute that I times 6, that's 6I. I times 5I, that's 5I squared. But we know that that I squared becomes a negative 1. And what's 5 times negative 1? Negative 5. So what do I really have up on top? I have a negative 5 with the positive 6I. You put the real part first and the imaginary part second. And on the bottom, what do I have? I have this 2. So let's put a 2 down there. And that's our answer, but we have to separate it into the real part and the imaginary part. You can't just leave it all together as one single fraction. So let's go to this and let's split the denominator. You're just going to put the denominator 2 on the 5, put the denominator 2 on the 6. So we end up with a negative 5 over 2 plus 6 over 2 with the I right next to the second fraction. Now, if you could actually do anything, do it. So right there, the 6 over 2, you could divide. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So your final answer will be negative 5 halves plus 3I.
Is it going to be multiple choice?
On these, it's open response. There's multiple choice from the other quiz on factoring, like which one of the following is a factor. You might have 2 answers, just one. Oh yeah, sorry, question?
Where did you get the I from?
So, great question. Why did I just multiply by I? If I had a binomial, like let's say I had 2 plus I, then I would multiply it by the complex conjugate 2 minus I, right? But since it's a single term, there's no binomial. If it's a single term, if I multiply I times I, it'll become I squared, which becomes negative 1. So the goal is to get rid of your I in the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So if you have a single term, just multiply it by I, that'll get rid of the I. Okay? But you got to do both top and bottom. Now, it's a different story if you had a like this guy right here. That's a binomial, right?
That'd be 1 minus 3.
So yeah, right here for sure you multiply by the complex conjugate 1 minus 3I. And what you do to the bottom, you do to the top 1 minus 3I. Okay, so let's distribute. This is a lot of work. This is as hard as it gets, I guess, with complex numbers. Let's do the top. 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times negative 3i is negative 6i. Negative 4i times 1 is negative 4i. And then negative 4i times negative 3i is positive 12i squared. Again, be careful with that I squared. You have to change it to a negative 1. So you really have 12 times negative 1. What's that? That's negative 12. And how about when I combine negative 6i with a minus 4i, what do I get? Negative 6i minus 4i. Come on, guys, combining like terms.
Negative 10i.
Negative 10i. Thank you very much. And how about this 2? Just bring it down. So I really have 3 terms up on top. Let me combine the first one with the last one. And what's my final numerator going to be?
Negative 10.
Negative 10 minus 10i. A lot of 10s. Okay, so that's the top. Let's figure out what's on the bottom. Again, it's a lot of work. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative 3i is negative 3i. Positive 3i times 1 is a positive 3i. Those are going to cancel. Positive 3i times a negative 3i is a negative 9i squared. And again, I squared should always be replaced with a negative 1. So what do I really have? The middle terms, the positive 3i and negative 3i, they cancel out. I have a nice, beautiful 1, a minus 9 times negative 1. What's 9 times negative 1? Or negative 9 times negative 1? Positive 9, right? So I have 1 plus 9. What do I have on the bottom? What do I have on the bottom?
10.
10. So that's what I have on the bottom. There's my answer, but I can't leave it as a single fraction. I'm going to separate it. So what do I have when I separate it?
Negative 10 over 10.
Negative 10 over 10 minus 10 over 10 with an I. And yeah, negative 1 minus I is your final answer. Now, there's going to be, like I said, one of these. It might even be the same one because I'm picking questions straight from the worksheets or from the homework. And we also have two solving problems. Now, this one is not solving with zero product property, okay? On the old quiz, we said solve with zero product property. That's where we factored, split, and solved. But right here, since there's only one single variable, let's just get that variable by itself by getting rid of things. So how could I get rid of this 35?
Subtract 35.
35. Subtract 35. Subtract 35. Let's rewrite it. We have a 5n squared equals negative 35. Then what?
Divide by 5.
Divide by 5. Divide by 5. We're going to end up with n squared equals negative 7. How could I get rid of that square? Square root. Square root. Now, here's the interesting part. N equals plus or minus. If you don't put that, you don't get full credit. What happens with that negative inside? It becomes an I on the outside of the root. And what about that square root of 7? There's nothing to do with the square root of 7. You can't break it down to get a perfect square number with multiplication. So that's it. That's your answer. Shall we try one more? Yes, please. Okay, why not? Let's do number 25 right here. What do I do? We end up with negative 2m squared equals 6. Then what?
Divide by negative 2.
Divide by negative 2. Thank you. And then we end up with m squared equals negative 3. Final step. Square root, m equals plus or minus I square root of 3. Ta-da. Easy peasy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop right there. This video is already long enough. I'm picking a couple of questions from this worksheet, maybe one or two from the book also. Identical questions, right? So who knows? Maybe I already explained some that I'm picking. I'm not going to say I would do the whole worksheet, but you know, it's up to you if you want to do the odd ones, the even ones. It's up to you. It's just practice, right? The answers are on the back. Remember that the first half of the quiz comes from the last quiz that we had. I posted a video explaining that entire quiz on Monday. Please watch that quiz on factoring, or that quiz video on factoring, right? Because half of the quiz on factoring, half of it is on complex numbers.